G'day, I'm Nick from UQS and welcome to our podcast, Beyond the Guesstimate. I've been involved in the construction sector since 1993 and pretty much the whole time I've been frustrated by the inefficiency in the industry. And what we do in this podcast is explore things around the concept of cost-informing design. And I take a pretty broad view of that, so right from the design part of the process, right through to construction, and just looking to talk to people that I find interesting around how we can improve our industry and just looking to pick their brains and see what we can learn and share. So what you're seeing is me learning real time about different subjects and hopefully you enjoy it. So construction productivity is something that often gets talked about, and the construction sector as a whole has pretty poor productivity compared to other sectors. And it's not just a New Zealand problem, it's a worldwide one. And why that has an impact is if your productivity isn't improving and other sectors are, then your costs are relatively getting more expensive. So if you look at something like the automotive industry, if they had the same sort of productivity improvement that construction has, cars would be probably 3 times the price that they are now. So what we're seeing is if you look at how many cars it takes to buy a house, it's going up because the cars are coming down because of the productivity improvement, and houses are at best staying the same and potentially getting worse. So it's a real challenge for us as an industry to maintain our competitiveness against all of the other things that people could spend their money on. When you look at housing, 50 to 60% of the cost is actually labour. So whether it's carpentry labour, plumbers, the labour going into assembling the windows, there's a big labour content in it. So anything around that productivity, efficiency has to influence how labour works. And that's a pretty challenging thing to do. With manufacturing, they're able to invest in automation, and that automation allows them to reduce the labour costs. The same opportunities aren't really the same in the construction sector. So yeah, we've seen people doing 3D printed houses. So far that doesn't look like it's changing the world. Overseas, I've seen bricklaying robots and the like. But the nature of housing is it's quite variable. The designs are very different, the materials used are very different, and the number of trades, the number of parties involved in a project is significant. Like a typical house has 50 or 60 different trades involved in it. So to try and get those sort of productivity gains out of it is pretty challenging. There isn't a silver bullet. There's going to be no magic housing system or machine or whatever that's going to do it. It's a whole lot of little things. In the Toyota manufacturing thing, I remember when I was involved in that years and years ago, they had a concept they talked about as mountains made of sand. And what they looked for there was lots of little improvements. And if you get lots of little improvements, so lots of little grains of sand, if you get enough of them together, you end up with a mountain. And I think that's a big thing for the construction sector, is that there isn't that magic bullet. So it's going to be around looking at lots of little different things in our industry, each different aspect of it, and looking to figure out how we can improve it. If you look at something like waste, they reckon that something like 10% of the materials that are delivered to site end up in the bin. If that was a refrigerator manufacturing factory, how expensive would fridges be if 10% of the stuff that's delivered to that factory goes straight to the tip? So that's a big opportunity is how we can improve that. If you look at, say, one of the differences with the construction sector against manufacturing is, say, look, if you're making a TV, you know you're going to be making a gazillion of them. So you can spend a lot of time in refining every aspect of that production of the TV. So how the components are made, where they're made, when they're delivered, how to assemble them, so making it efficient to be able to put them all together. Each of those things can be researched, documented, refined, and optimized so that you can make a TV more efficiently. The challenge for the building industry is because of that variability, it's really hard to do that sort of thing, but that's what we need to be doing to improve our productivity. So my guest today is Mark Kirby, and Mark's probably even more of a geek of this sort of thing than I am. So he's done a PhD. So what was your PhD in?
Yeah, so we just finished PhD. So that was looking at the effects of quality management on productivity in the residential sector. So particularly looking at that part of the sector, because I think it's sort of under-resourced. It's a big part of the economy, and it just needs a little bit of help. So we sort of targeted that and found that quality management is a big part of the solution going forward.
So how did you get into the construction sector? So what got you to the point where you're doing PhDs and how to improve it? So what was your starting?
I'll show my age now. So, look, I think we go back to, I'm Australian, number one. So we'll start with that. Yeah, we'll start with that. And then we look at, when I finished school, there wasn't much work around. I finished senior school. I was kind of thinking that, what do? You fall into trades. That seemed to be what your parents did. So that seemed to be the logical step. But for me, what trade and what sort of suited me, I didn't really know. So I fell into carpentry and just thought that might be a good idea, in the future, that I can sort of build myself a house. And that's where it all sort of started. So I really had no idea what was involved in carpentry. I thought you might lay carpet and things like that, but I really didn't know. So, and then obviously off I went from there. Really enjoyed it.
So you did an apprenticeship for a builder? Or?
Yeah, builder by trade. So
in Aussie or here?
Yeah, in Australia. Australia. So I did through the Queensland Master Builders Association at the time. They had apprenticeship schemes. So I think there was a time served back in those days compared to the competency base that we've got now. So I think that was totally different, construction back then to what we are today. But 4 years of hard work, and I think it took me about 3.5 of those to learn how to build anything. But it stuck by me. It's been great to have that background as I've progressed through the industry. And it's served me well even at PhD level.
Right.
Really good.
So to get from an apprentice carpenter to a doctor in construction or whatever it is, what was the journey? So what did you do after you say became a tradesman?
So I became a tradesman, then subcontracted, did that for probably about 4 or 5 years, and then realised myself that this wasn't the future. I'd worked for some tier 1 companies, got into management, and found that. So
what type of construction was it? Residential?
Residential, residential. I started my own business, had that on the Gold Coast, did quite well there. But I sort of targeted, I would target waterfront properties and things like that. I didn't want to sort of go in with the bottom level where it was too competitive. I found a little niche and just sort of designed and built around that. Okay. So for me, that worked really well. But that came later after I'd sort of learned about systems and processes from tier 1 companies.
Right.
And sort of worked my way through, into construction management then and then into operations management. So.
And how did you end up in New Zealand?
Yes. Well, I'm a snowboard instructor trainer as well. So I've sort of worked all over the world doing that. So I met someone and then we ended up back here and had my lovely daughter and here we are still 14 years later. So,
right.
Yeah.
So you've been in New Zealand 14 years?
Yeah, 14 years now. Haven't seen much change, if I'm honest, in the construction industry. Yeah. But
so when you came into construction here?
Yeah, I did. I sort of started from the bottom, I suspect you could say. I'd been successful to a level back home. I'd enjoyed that and travelled the world and had some fun, and then came back to do some work. So it was interesting. Different sets of rules and regulations and way you do things, but building's building.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, it's really just adapting to what's there and try and make sure that you're doing the best you can. So,
right. What sort of companies were you working for here?
I think I started with Jalcon Homes.
Okay.
They gave me the first opportunity there and progressed through there.
What sort of role were you doing?
It was just supervision.
Right.
So I'd sort of stepped right back and thought, well, I need to learn everything in New Zealand and understand how we build these things. And so that was the role that I took. I didn't want to do commercial. I'd done some of that before. Didn't like working Saturdays. So I was like, enough's of that. Don't want to do that. So we stuck with that, the residential bit. So I worked my way through there reasonably quick. Got into some multi-unit stuff that I really enjoyed. Great company, Jalcon and Lindsay's, he knows his stuff. There's no ifs or buts there. So great to work for a company that puts quality first and the customer first,
right.
At the end of the day. So I then went from that into operations management, so stepped up a little bit further.
So what does operations management mean in a building company?
I think...
Was that Jalcon or...?
No, that was Property Partners. So sort of worked for them for a while. So... that meant more about the overall view of systems and processes in the organisation, but also with teams under you. I was the link between architectural, civil engineering, sales, and senior management, really. So,
what type of houses were they building?
You had a mixture of. They're all bespoke houses, but we would do subdivisions.
Right.
So the owners, to be fair, were quite ahead of the time, if you like, in some ways. They had this business opportunity that they put together where it was a one-stop shop. Didn't work out in the end, But, I think there was sort of some scope there for the industry to take that on board and do it well. I think it takes a bit of money is the other side of it.
So they were doing developing properties and then bringing in investors to build houses in that property.
Yeah, we would buy. They would buy the land, and they could be up to 4 to 6 lots,
right?
And then design houses for them in house.
Yeah,
do all the civil engineering and engineering things that were required, and then we'd go and build them. So we had building section as well as QS section, as well as the architects and civil engineers, town planner. All that sort of stuff. So it was a really good model, really good model. But
and they were sold to investors or
mums and dads, investors. Yeah, you had a bit of both there.
Yeah.
But the problem with the model was obviously the resource consent. When it takes from land to development into building, is that time frame and that lag where you're not making any money,
and you've got capital,
and you've got all this tied up, and you've got to, So the model changed a little bit there towards the end, but I think probably a little bit too late.
Yeah, right. And I understand you've done a bit of the sort of KO type housing as well.
Yeah, done a bit of that. Was construction manager for a company that we did quite a bit of that KO type work, multi-unit sort of enterprises. But you look at that section in itself and you see that you've got a lot of home builders that come in and step up into that area. And that in itself is quite difficult because you've got a different product. You've now got things like fire and acoustics and air control, you had all sorts of things that you need to take care of that you might not necessarily come across, when you're building a house. So I think that is an enlightening experience, if anything else. But, it takes a little bit of planning and understanding where you are in business maturity, I think, to get to that next level. Which is why we probably see a lot of these businesses, performing poorly, I suppose, at the end of the day.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, it could be one of the factors.
So your PhD then, it wasn't that long ago you completed it?
Yeah, I've just completed that. So I did a master's.
It's a big effort.
It's a massive effort. I did a master's, I think, 2019. Didn't do an undergrad or anything like that. I kind of did the trade route and the hard line, if you like.
Yeah.
I spent 25 years, I think, at the front line of construction. So I enjoy it, passionate about it, really love it. But for me, I needed a little bit more.
Yeah. So what made you want to get into the academic side? Because it's quite a transition from sort of your more practical background.
Yeah, it is. It's a big step. I needed to know more. I kept seeing the same things time and time again in 2 different countries as well. So I was like, well, what's really going on here? I need to understand for myself. We can do things better. It's not hard. Being a builder, you see builders do things. You're like, well, why are we doing that? We can do that better. And I think we cut a lot of corners, time and cost pressures, margins, all these things add up, don't they? Procurement models. So for me, I just wanted to know more. And that led me to the Masters. And that kind of...
what was the thesis, your subject for your Masters?
For Masters was the role of the project manager in residential construction. So I had to look at that to try and understand, what is the role compared to what we see in commercial? Because they're vastly different.
Right.
Vastly different. Essentially doing the same job, but they're vastly different.
Same title.
Same title, same role, sort of. But vastly different. So I needed some explanation to try and put some theory to it because no one could tell me. So I was like, well, I've got to find just this burning desire to find more. And that's kind of led me into academia and then did well in that and thought, well, there's this other thing that really needs to be solved. And that's productivity.
So your PhD thesis then was?
Yeah, it was trying to find the effect of quality management on productivity in the New Zealand residential sector.
Right.
So it was very specific. Could see the problems, could understand the problems, could fix the problems, but just couldn't get my head around why these problems existed. Yeah. Because, it's all reactive, isn't it? Coming back to fixing things and checklists and all this sort of stuff. That's reactive quality. That's not how we manage quality. And I think as an industry, we've kind of adapted to that and think that we're doing the right things.
We're sort of ending up with an acceptable result at the end of it. But the cost to get into that acceptable result is pretty high.
And you see that in failure rates, don't you? First time failure inspection rates. You look at framing. I think 32% of inspection rates fail first time. You look at final inspections. I think that's around 37%, somewhere there. Claddings, again in the 30s, 36. So you've got 4 major inspections there, not to mention waterproofing and things like that are failing considerably time and time again.
And that's a high failure rate, and it's being done by qualified people.
That's right.
Obviously, there's something
wrong,
going wrong there. So, and there obviously if you're having to redo stuff from a productivity point of view, any rework is absolutely a bad negative on the bottom line. So how do we define productivity? You hear it talked about a lot, but it's a bit of a nebulous term in a lot of ways. So how do you define productivity, and is what is generally talked about a good definition?
Yeah, I think that's tricky in itself, isn't it? It's a tricky thing to measure. You've got your total factor productivity, you've got multi-factor, I suppose. You've got
so what do those terms mean?
So I think total factor is probably used more at the macro level. It takes in all your resources, all your bits and pieces, and they measure that. But it doesn't really give us the accuracy we need at industry level. That kind of then you break that down to labour productivity, which is generally the measure.
So when you're talking factors, that's labour, capital,
equipment costs, the whole lot. Right. Bring it all into the equation and see where we're at. I think where we fail, or possibly what makes it difficult in New Zealand, is we don't have a national measure of productivity for the construction sector. If you look at other sectors globally, I think Singapore, for instance, if you look at them, probably a bit of a pillar in that area, but they'll use labour productivity, square metre built per man per day type thing, and that's their national measure. So that in itself is good. That's a good start.
And do you say we don't have that sort of data?
We don't have.
So when they talk, from what my understanding of labour productivity here, when they're talking the construction sector, it's dollar value divided by labour hours, I think is what they talk about currently.
Yeah, and the problem with this is it's subjective, isn't it? Because even at the Singapore level, where it is providing good data and good feedback, we need a measure that's operational. And I think if you look at productivity from the perspective of built right first time, so these first time principles that are really the governing factors that we need. So it's built on time, it's built to quality, so no defects, and it's built to budget. So if we can do that time and time again, then we've got productivity.
We're going to be more efficient.
We're going to be better at what we're doing. So, and if we want to get better than that again, instead of building that same house in 10 days, where we're keeping up and we're being productive, we build it in 9, well, then we've got growth.
Yeah.
And then we start to make some huge impacts, right across the board, don't we? Living standards, the whole lot.
Yeah, I talked before about the impact of productivity being a relativity issue, but also it's a wages issue. So for people in the construction sector, if you want to get paid more, there's only 2 ways you can do it. You can either increase your price or you get more productive, which allows you to make more money, and then you can share that money amongst the people. So productivity really is absolutely vital. If we are New Zealand, if anything, over time is sort of becoming a lower and lower wage economy, and a lot of that is because not only is the construction sector not great from a productivity point of view, New Zealand Inc. isn't great. So it's sort of something you hear a lot about in the media, but the reality is it does have a real impact on people.
Absolutely, huge impact on all of society. It's one of the biggest sectors, and the fact that we haven't got that government support, and if we look at it realistically, we need a bit of that to drive standards and improve and benchmark and do all these things that the good countries are doing. But we haven't got any of that, so we've kind of been left on our own. But that links us back to policy changes back in the mid-1980s. So we're still building like we did, but without the prescriptive methods. We've got performance-based standards now, which in and of themselves are fine. But when you leave performance-based standards without quality, then you've just got a performance-based standard. You haven't got the quality.
So let's unpack there. But so back in the 80s when it was prescriptive, if you wanted to build something, the regulations would say this is how you build something. You don't have any other choices of being able to do that. And I guess go back to the Ministry of Works and the sort of government-driven projects where they would spend the time figuring out a good way of building something. It would become the standard and everybody would build that way.
That's right. Yeah. You had the NZS, 1900s, I think they were the bylaws of the day, weren't they? I think post-war. But they went through for a lot of years and we built a lot of great products with that. I think the change came about, the Ministry of Works certainly looked after the quality, it looked after the specifications, and it enforced the rules, so to speak. So you had, not to say that it was perfect either, but you certainly had a benchmark and a standard to work to. And then along comes, we had some policy shifts there in the mid-1980s, probably due to economic times and globally too. Global pressures there. Most countries were changing and sort of moved to this free market economy. And
obviously the downside of prescriptive is if you come up with this bright idea for doing something better,
Yeah.
no way of being able to do it. So you're stuck with however it was.
Yeah. And that was the I suspect part of the major force of change there for government. They're looking at things. We were one of the most over-regulated countries amongst the OECD back then. So, you've probably got time there to sit and consider, well, what can we do better and how do we innovate and what does that look like? I think that's great in itself, but the problem being is, well, we need to plan it a little bit better because we didn't.
Yeah.
And that.
So then looking at sort of what you're meaning by performance standards, so the difference between prescriptive and performance is prescriptive says you've got to build it this way. Yep. Performance says you've got to achieve this outcome.
Yeah.
And how you get there is your problem. As long as you can prove you can achieve that outcome.
That's right. Yeah. And so then we move into this policy change and we start to see, well, okay, here come the performance-based standards. What's that, 1991 maybe? I think
so early 90s,
BCA around somewhere there. Yeah. And then we also look at the same time, we need to look at, well, what do we do with the apprenticeship scheme? Because we see that change around 92, I think, somewhere there as well, where we went from the time served basis now into competency-based. Go fast forward there probably, 4 or 5 years, and we start to see the start of the leaky homes crisis. We go through there to 2004-ish. We've got a good 5-6 years of really bad performing housing that has just been left because of this performance-based model.
And I'm sure that back in the day, people weren't intending to build a poor-performing house. They thought they had a good system. They thought they had a good idea. I guess the issue is that move from the prescriptive, was this is how you do it, to something saying, well, it's got to perform like this. And if people say, well, yeah, I think it's going to perform like that, you don't necessarily have that history or the research behind it to be able to know conclusively it's actually going to work the way you think it's going to work. Yeah. And I guess the advantage of that prescriptive one is it's been refined over
many years,
decades, hundreds of years. Yeah. Whereas I guess we didn't have the skill maybe to move to a prescriptive model.
And I think you take all these things. It was the perfect storm, if you like, in some ways, wasn't it? It's a $47 billion problem that is in our history, and we're still paying for it today. That's going to go up and up and up. Yeah, and that's just residential.
Still be building them too.
That's scary. That's right. That's the scary bit. I think what we need to look at back in that time is that the government of the day introduced the ISO standard. We had ISO 9000 for apples, if you like, but we decided that it's not good enough for our own citizens' homes, which, the apples have performed really well over time, but housing, we've got a problem. We've got a problem. So, you've got to go back and have a look and say, well, could we have done better? I think probably we could have, retrospectively.
Yeah, I guess it's
always the benefit, isn't it?
Easier to look in hindsight. So, you're in a relatively unique position of having seen how things worked in Aussie and how things worked here. Often our governments seem to do things roughly in parallel. So did Aussie go through a similar change from prescriptive to performance? And if they did, how did it work out over there?
Yeah, I think, if we look back at some of the building standards, I suspect, from when I was a builder and to what I saw, and when you look retrospectively in the leaky home crisis, some of the systems that we implemented, cladding's monolithic without battens and straight on the wall.
Yeah, basically the paint on the outside is your moisture.
In Australia, we were doing that with battens when I was an apprentice. So we were still using the monolithic type claddings, but they had battens and things like that. So you always had this cavity and this airflow and things going on. Not to say they were perfect either. But then if you turn that into, well, okay, has that performed better than what we've done here? Well, there's productivity problems there too. Yeah. And there's quality problems there too. Very similar. And if you look around the globe...
Did they make the same shift from prescriptive to performance, or what's the regulatory basis?
Yeah, I think you've got a bit of a hybrid there, I think is what you've got. It is performance-based, don't get me wrong. But I think you've got a better base to work from. That's what I think is the difference there. We build very similar, different products. There's no ifs or buts about that. We've got termites to worry about over there too, so that changes a whole thought process in itself. But I think there's parallels to sort of both sides of the ocean, if you like. We could always do things better. No ifs or buts.
Yeah, so I think you could say in a lot of ways that policy shift was inevitable. That you couldn't. The prescriptive locked things in so much, it was going to have to change. What do you think we could have done differently to achieve that performance shift that really needed to happen? And there's been a lot of innovation, and there's definitely been a lot of good things that have come out of the flexibility, the performance-based approach gives us as an industry, and we need it to be able to make those productivity shifts. Otherwise, we're locked into what's happening in the 80s. So what could we have done differently to try and avoided some of the issues that we had?
So I think what we do, if we look back at the root cause of the problem, and if we look at the policy change and what it led to this, this culture of time and cost over quality. All of a sudden we opened it up from this prescriptive, you must this, and this is the result you will get. So it was outcome-based in its own way, but it was telling you how you got there. Yeah. And it measured it and benchmarked it, and you could do your bit. But then we sort of opened it up and said, well, it's a free market, do your best. And literally, that's government, do your best, off you go, and we're going to sit over here and hopefully it all works out. We created... And it's not the industry's fault. We were handed a self-regulated model that was never meant to be. We removed the state as the master builder. The minute that we did that, we lost all impact. We kind of just said, well, we assumed we had a competent workforce that could just get on and innovate and do what they needed to do, but
and know what they need to do to achieve the outcomes needed.
Yeah. We took an innovative approach from the Nordics and brought it straight over here and said, here we go, and it was innovative, absolutely, and there's nothing wrong with it. Performance-based methods are fine. There's nothing wrong with that. What we need to do is put quality with it.
Yeah. And that's what your research was about, was more specifically from the quality perspective?
Yeah. For me, it was, well, can I tie quality management to improving productivity? You see in the research, the empirical literature shows that they're two distinctly different, although they share commonalities right through, but they are treated in silos a lot. Right. We know that quality is a holistic approach to improvement in business. We know that. The literature shows that. Manufacturing for years and years. In construction, we use it as an excuse for poor productivity. Poor quality is poor productivity. And we're like, hang on, there's a disconnect there. We need to see this conceptual divergence. It needs to be reconciled because it's not actually the case. And I think that's what stopped us from realising that quality can actually improve productivity.
Yeah, and I think you'd like say the manufacturing guys have realised that the only way you get consistent quality is by having a good process. If you've got a good process, that's the basis of being able to get more efficient. Yeah. So if you know exactly how something gets from here to there, then you can work out how can we improve it. So you know you've got to do these steps to end up with that quality. Yeah. Once you know those steps, then you say, okay, well, this step here, that takes a long time. What can we do to try and make it better? Yeah. And we don't seem to have got that in the construction sector?
No, we don't, because I think that policy change forced us to think about cost and time. And, the minute that did, it created this culture that now all we think about is time and cost. And you see that in failures and inspection rates. You only have to look at that and say to yourself, well, why are we faced with a $2.5 billion a year problem with reworks and defects just in residential construction, estimated at that $2.5 billion every year? Well, we don't have to look too far back to see why. We need to put quality at the same spot. Quality can't be the floor, cost can't be the ceiling. They've got to work together.
So that 2.5 billion number, where does it come from?
So that's a brands number. They did some research, I think, I'm going to say 2019, 2020, somewhere there. And they got into that with NZIA and looked at, what is the cost of poor quality to the industry. So, and astonishing figures. Absolutely.
And so were they looking at like rework the builders have got to do, or is it the leaky buildings, things having to be fixed later? What sort of stuff were they classifying as part of that 2.5 billion?
Yeah, I think what you're looking at was generally just reworks and defects of the product that we're building at the moment. The leaky homes crisis, like I said, is different. 47 billion and an animal of its own, isn't it? Yeah. It's crazy. So, it was kind of looking at just those elements there. And there's some great reports around, the government's known about this. But here we are still today, spending 2.5 billion on something that is essentially, it's unavoidable. We've got this culture that we've said, well, we must do it. Defects have become part. We've hyper-normalised defects and reworks so much that it's just part of what we do every day. We're immune to it. We even price it into our jobs. It's crazy. So we've got to get that culture change. We've got to do that. Anything that we do beyond that, and you can see that over the years. You can ask yourself, well, why haven't we improved productivity? Because we haven't got to the root cause of what the problem was. I've done that, I think, through our research, and it's quite clear that quality management is the driver of productivity in the sector.
And so what does quality management look like if you're applying it into a residential building company? So not a big one.
Yeah.
Most of the market is interesting that so you've got these big guys, the bigger group house building, the Fletchers and the like, but they're only 10 or 20% of the total market. So most houses are built by builders that are doing 4 to 12 houses a year. So if you want to fix the industry, those are the guys that are what you've got to look at. So what sort of things should they be looking to do differently?
Yeah, I think you're spot on there. That 92 or so percent, 96%, I'm not sure, of the industry is the micro organisations, the enterprises 1 to 5. And we're full of that. And they're underserved. We've left them out there they're at the front line doing the hard yards day in, day out, and they are doing their best. There's no sort. So it's the system that's letting them down. So things that we can do to improve that is, we look at the principles of quality management, things like evidence-based approaches, for instance, using data to drive the decisions rather than just guessing. We've done it like this forever, so it's got to be right.
So that sort of seems a bit unreachable for me, for a little business. You start talking about data. If I'm running a building company, what data do I've got? What influence do I have? How can I use that to make better decisions?
So I've got a little trial at the moment that I'm doing. I developed a rework calculator for inspections, particularly because I feel this is one area that we can really improve and will make a massive difference to that 2.5 billion in itself. You enter your project data, so it might just be your revenue for that project or for your year, whatever you want to do, depends what you're looking at. We've got the 4 main benchmarked by council inspection failures, first-time failure rates. We've got them there. You type your numbers of inspections in there. It'll tell you exactly what that's cost you. We've got some cost multipliers in there for a small, medium, large, and it will show you what it is. The problem that we've got, I think, in the industry is the hidden cost. Quality is a hidden cost. And when we do see it, the spreadsheet's not the financial spreadsheets. They'll say, you got a bit of a problem here, you're losing money, but where?
Yeah.
Quality is where you're going to lose it. So if you start looking at things like these diagnostics to have a look at where I've lost that $7,000 in the past 3 months, you'll see it on this. This calculator will show you. And then it'll also show you the opportunity that you have to improve that and the profit you can bring back. I think because it's hidden, it's a month later that you're looking at these things. If you're looking at your financial data, but it's too late.
And the problem with the financial data is there's so many things that impact it. So from my point of view, the quality of the estimate that's done in the first place, if that isn't good, then it may not be, you may have built it fine, but if you estimated it wrong or you got the scope of work wrong at the beginning, that's a big one, is getting the scope right. If you got those wrong, then you're going to have a negative, a red number at the end of it, without the quality being a factor. So you're basically saying that the inspections are the driving point for identifying quality trends?
When you look at benchmarks from council, then you've got to start and take notice of what's there. If you fail an inspection, say at the minor cost that you just didn't have your documentation on site, you've got to book a re-inspection. That's going to cost you about $400 or $500 just to book the inspection 3 days later, and then someone's got to be there. So, and then there's the opportunity cost and all these other things that we bring into it. But just on costs that you can see, there's $500-600 there straight away, and you don't know if you passed or failed yet. So then you go again, and you might need another inspection. Some of the data that I've collected from a few of the builders shows that there's multiple times that these inspections are failing. And they're commonalities too, bracing not right, tie down not right, lintel sizes not to plan, just little things that they're avoidable.
So what could they be doing differently to avoid that? So you could say the inspection is the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff. You want to avoid failing that. So what sort of things could they be looking to do to try and improve that quality so that it's right from the beginning? And I guess some of it's the builder, but then it's probably back up through the design process, product suppliers.
It goes right through, doesn't it? So quality gates is where we need to sort of start and have a look at, that can control from the tender stage, can control through the construction phase as well. What we do is build, and then we fix it later. We just keep pushing the risk down the hill until we get to that major phase. We've got a sheet or we've got a clad or whatever it may be. And then all of a sudden we've got holes in joists that shouldn't be there and things missing left, right and centre from other trades or just things missing from trades that should have been there a long time ago. So until we start to take that into serious contention, we need to have systems in place and use quality as a system rather than a checklist. An afterthought, reactive afterthought.
Yeah. So it really comes back to the whole process thing that the manufacturing guys are really focused on.
Yeah, I mean, you could look at that, for instance, pre-line. You could see, even in deliveries. Let's have a look at that and just say frame deliveries. We'll start with that. Let's say the builder turns up and he puts his frames up, but he doesn't know the moisture content of the timber. Was it delivered on time? Was it a full delivery when it came? And all these things add up to their delays and their loss of profits. So we're not collating any of these sort of data. We're just accepting. We're accepting all the way through. And I think we can get it just a little bit sharper. Of what we're doing. We know it's there. We just accept it and we move on. Oh, well, it's just what it is.
I guess that mountain's built of sand.
That's right.
If we keep picking up all of those little things and improving on them, then the end result is a material
change.
Improvement, whereas each little one of them is hardly worth bothering with, but it adds up. And so then as a business, it's a matter of working out, how can we systemize it so we are picking up those things. And obviously I've got to go see Simplicity Living and have a look at the stack cell system and what they're doing. And really they're taking that thinking to the extreme, where everything is really well sequenced and it's not going to work for everybody in the building industry, but there's definitely a lot we can learn from it. And it's a matter of how can we take that systemized approach and make it work in situations that are not, simplicity apartment buildings that they've got so much control over it. We've got to, so we're not going to, I don't know if the whole industry is going to be able to replicate what Simplicity do, but there's definitely aspects of it that I think along the lines of what you were saying, is that those are the things we've got to be looking at.
They've got some benefits. They've got some great systems, haven't they? Like they really have. I think from me, from my perspective, I'm thinking of quality as a system that should drive the business. So the principles of quality management should be throughout the business. It doesn't matter if you start with that, because it's got to start with leadership. It's got to start at the very top, and it's got to be right through the organisation. So then we start to see a change. Otherwise, we haven't got a culture. My research highlighted that it is culture that is the problem. So, how do we fix culture? Behaviours, changes. These are the things we need to look at. We can't just say to industry, well, this is what you need to do. That doesn't work. We need to help industry and show them that, hey, there's a better way. And not just for the builders to make more profit, but for the end user. Cheaper housing affordability, better product. I mean, how many clients do you see around that have built a new home and they're still struggling getting the builder back to finish off and defects, and that's not a productive output.
And even if they're willing to come back and fix the defects, it's still a cost.
That's right.
Either they're incurring it or they've built it into the price.
Which is why they don't want to come back. It's a cost. It's a cost.
Yeah.
So it's a bit of a catch. We know we're doing it, but the costs are they're hidden. So we need to make that, I think, part of the equation. And that seems to be working with some of the builders I'm working with at the moment. It's only 3, but I think what I'm seeing there is that through tweaking a few processes and defining what done looks like, that morning meeting, changing that into talking a little bit about quality and what happened yesterday, that the builder failed on something. Well, we should report that upwards, and then we should be back to check, and then we're going to talk about it the next day and define what that looks like. From there, you get your first standard for your business. You got your SOP, haven't you? This is how we put a window in, and then you hand it out to everyone. It won't fail again. It shouldn't, because now we've got a process. And it's come from a bad thing because we failed it, but now we've turned it into a good thing. That's value added. That's innovation. That's quality. That's where we need to sort of start and look.
So when you look at say architects and designers designing a building and they create this spec, and we get it a lot. I got one the other day. It was 1,131 pages. So that specification should be their SOP, shouldn't it? They're sort of going to that level of detail, but it's done generically, probably at a distance from the builder, so it becomes a doorstop rather than an SOP. So
So
so the fact we're doing all of these things, but we're not actually connecting them together into something that actually provides
all in silos, aren't they? Yeah, that's right. And I think one of the biggest problems that we've got could be that we're not defining scope effectively. If you look at that 1,100-page specification, no doubt there'll be a client rep there that's somewhere involved. We need to define what that is in a proper work breakdown structure so as we understand what the package level looks like. Once we apply that, we can put KPIs to that are full life cycle of the building and also quality focus. Each one of these things will have a framing, for instance. We spoke about moisture content and deliveries. All these should be KPIs of those packages. And if they don't happen, then you can't go forward. As simple as that. It gets in the air control, acoustics. You can do it right through your packages. Tie your costs to that as well, and then you've got something that, okay, now we really can measure.
Yeah.
Use that with something like earned value management, bigger jobs. Not going to suit for everyone, but we can dull that down into...
Yeah. So what's earned value management?
So it will take... if we want to look at it, it will give you your schedule and your cost performance indices. So it will give you the health of the project. And I think that's something that we can use right through construction. You probably wouldn't use it for a fence or or a small
by
house.
earned value, you're meaning sort of value, what you get paid is the value of the work that you've done to that point?
That's right. If you build a fence for a week, it costs $1,000, $200 a day. You get to day 3, but you've only done 2 days worth of work. Well, your earned value is only 400, should be 600. Right. You're in a bit of trouble. So, and that's as simple as it needs to be on residential projects, just to bring it to light, and then we can tie cost and program to all these things. If the program's not reflective of the scope, then how can we build it? If the scope's not right.
Yeah, so that to me, I think there's a practical thing there is so having an accurate budget of what it's likely to cost, but then checking and managing yourself against that budget. And it almost doesn't matter what level of detail you're managing it at, as long as you're managing it at something. And if there's a variance, then you can dig into what the detail is of that variance.
And the thing is, if you're doing it live, day in, day out, so to speak, updating your program and everything's linked, it's really not that difficult to dig in to see, well, what's going wrong. And alter course. But if you wait a month later, we have our PCG meetings and we sit back and we talk about this, but we're talking about what happened last month. We're up here. We're already gone past all that, So
we do estimating, and estimating is an estimate. We're trying to guess what it's going to cost to build something that's quite complex, quite variable. But from my experience, quite often, if the builder embeds that estimate into their process, it becomes self-fulfilling. So if we've worked out it's going to take X amount of hours to do this thing, and the guys doing it know that there's X amount of hours, as long as we're not too far out, it's probably going to end up about X amount of hours. But if you don't have that tracking in place, they get started on it and they finish when they finish, and it may be X or it may be Y.
That's right. And then you're back to, well, why is this taking so long and why have we lost so much money? At the end of it,
and it's way too late. You can't do anything about it.
Unhappy clients, I got this, and it's all resolvable. That's the bigger side of it. So it's really changing that culture, and really trying to help industry to sort of see, well, hey, we can do better. And it's not major changes. We're talking simple things here.
And understanding on the way through. If you're only getting the result at the end, it's too late. You can't do anything about it. If you're doing it on the way through, then you've got a chance of understanding what actually went wrong, because basically by the time you're at the end, it's the little things where it's going wrong, and they're just buried in the big mass. Whereas if you're keeping a track at a reasonable level of detail on the way through, you can start picking it up and dealing with it as you go.
It's that continuous improvement, isn't it? If we look at cycles like the PDCA, for instance, and
that's another term I don't know.
It's the plan, do, check, act cycle. So I think it's been around for forever and a day, and it's a brilliant process in that you will continually improve if you use every element of it.
There should be an R on the end. Review.
Yeah. Well, that's the A bit. That's the A bit.
Oh, okay.
So we get to that. But I think in New Zealand we do the do. That's it. We don't plan. We don't do any of the other checks and acts. I spoke about before about meeting in the morning and defining how you put a window in. That's the act. That's the continuous improvement for the business. That's not hard. That's 15 minutes of, okay, well, this is how we put a window in. This is great. We're not going to make sure that doesn't happen again. And we're going to upskill the people that we've got working with us. That's what it's about. Then we make more money. Not lose it.
Or be more competitive, more cost effective.
All these things. It's only good things that come from from quality, in the end, I truly believe that quality is a profit lever. It's one of the biggest profit levers a business can have, especially when margins are tight. And industry is not that busy. You've got to make a point of difference. You need an evidence-based approach to quality. You can't just say, I'm good at quality.
Yeah, because everybody says that.
I've got a checklist. Look, come have a look. Yeah. That's not how it works. So the data gives you that ability. When I talk about data, you only need 4 or 5 points. I get 4 or 5 points emailed to me. I put it into my system, and it prints out all the graphs and the info that you need to drive into where that problem exists in live. You give it to me each day, you'll get it each day. Yeah, right. You'll be able to log into that and say, okay, I see what's going on here. You might not know how to fix it, but I'm here. I'll help you. I'll show you where you can go wrong, how to fix these things. But I think getting industry to that point where they understand that it's not a big deal to give a little bit of data to help improve your business. We're prepared to throw away up to $15,000 a year. And imagine just for a minute that we have another bin on site that says profit only. Recycle, Jubo only, profit only. Here we go. Put all the money in there instead of doing it right. We're happy to do that, but we don't want to, So it's a big opportunity for the industry. We can do things better for sure.
So if people wanted to learn more about this space, so it certainly sounds like it's quite heavily systems oriented. So do they have to be using a particular system to be able to do this?
Look, for me, it's about the principles of quality management, lean construction. We bring these things, the PDCA cycle, we bring these things into your everyday work. That's all I do. I don't talk about these things. I just say, well, why don't we try this or why don't we try that? And then, because I look at the processes that they're already using, I don't want to change the way. You're the builder, you're the expert, not me. So but I've got a little bit of stuff there that can help to guide you in the right direction with the principles of quality management. We don't need to talk about them. We don't need a big book. We don't need any of that stuff. We just need to look at doing things right. And if we look at focusing on quality rather than productivity, it will be a byproduct.
Productivity is an outcome.
That's right. It's not something we just focus on this will improve itself. We don't need to structure anything for that. That's the way I see it anyway. And that's why it's so easy for the residential sector. If we can grasp this and get a hold of it, everyone's business will improve. Everywhere.
So I was asking about where people, so obviously you're willing to help people with doing this sort of stuff?
Yeah, so I've just put together a website, so drmarkkirby.com. So I've got a website there. There's some stuff on there that you can go on there and try for yourself. The data's all secure. I don't see it. It'll give you a report straight in front of your eyes. It'll tell you what you're losing and it'll tell you which inspection, where that is. And then there's also the opportunity to join the trial. There's a few things there you need to fill out because it's not for everyone. Not everyone wants to improve their business. So I'd rather work with people that really want to get better at what they're doing and put them in the right direction. It's all free. I'm not charging anyone for anything. So I just want to help them get better at what they're doing. Simple.
That's very good of you. You can't keep doing that.
I can't keep doing it.
No. So get in fast. So you mentioned lean construction there. So what does that mean?
Yeah, I think what we need to look at there is probably the value additive and the minimisation of waste. They're the two things that lean really does, but it assumes that a process is already good. So adding lean to something that's not already got a good process is really not going to give you the result that you're anticipating.
So when you say they're adding lean, what do you mean?
Lean systems say, let's say you've got a pretty poor program that doesn't reflect the scope of the work, but you put in last planner system, which is a lean process, if you like. Well, it's not really going to help you fix the problems and build it quicker because your program wasn't right in the first place, because the scope wasn't right in the first place. So it's not a magic fix. The other side with lean is that it doesn't specifically target quality. So it's a good additive to something like ISO, PDCA. They all work hand in hand because you've got that process approach. So I think it's a powerful additive to business. Just-in-time deliveries, last planner, two things that everyone can use.
So the last planner, that again, it's a term I've heard, but I don't particularly understand it.
Yeah, so it's really looking at what is on the board in terms of we put a board up and then we look at the program. And we get everyone together and we talk about, well, what's holding this up? Is this holding you up? Where are we at? To get ahead of time and to stay up with all the problems and things that we can see, but not just ourselves. We're bringing everyone together to have a talk about this. Quite often in those meetings, you see that the plumber's got to start in 2 weeks, and he's come up with an idea that actually we haven't thought of. Okay, well, let's get that on the board, and who's going to address that? How are we going to address that? And we just collaborate and talk. It doesn't have to be strict to a model. It has to be flexible enough to suit the business that's using it. That's the way I use it anyway.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So is it widely used in construction?
I think more in commercial, but probably, again, I'll come back to that. If the program's right and the scope's right, then you'll get the results. So I think the problems are in those two areas more so than the tools that we can use to improve. Right. We can't improve what's already bad if we don't know what's bad.
Yeah,
so,
right.
I think we've got to start right back at the beginning, have a look at how we tender, how we scope, and then how we roll that out and what the expectations
are. So by rolling it out, I mean planning, because it sounds like that the lean is assuming there's a plan there that you're then going to be looking at and improving. So
exactly.
Having a plan.
Yeah, we spoke about the WBS and one of the KPIs. Well, that's where some of that lean comes in, the just-in-time deliveries, the last planner. We can put all that in as ticks along the way, depending on which package. Might be the framing package. You can use it wherever you want. But they need to be reminders, don't they? I mean, I often see builders turn up on site with half the equipment that they need to build. Frames are damaged. There's all sorts of things missing, but they still start. So, well, hang on, I'm here to make money too. So it's a bit unfair to ask him to start. Site says, well, the program's here. We've got to keep up with the program. They're right. Contract says we've got to keep moving. So, we've got these little things there that need to be resolved. If we could get the builders and the trades involved in the tender side of things, as they're the experts, then I think we get a more collaborative approach. There's a little bit of risk there too, obviously, but I think you'll get a better result.
So that's sort of coming into procurement methodology. So how does the procurement practices you see in industry affect this ultimate quality outcome? Yeah,
well, I think we've probably touched a bit on that too, and you see that it's more combative, isn't it? We're pushing it downhill. All the risk is pushed down to the person that really can't manage it. Which I think is unfair. It's a lack of accountability. Models that use a WBS up front, even if it's a
work breakdown structure.
Yeah, work breakdown structure. Use that up front, break it down to the package level, and then tie the quality KPIs to it, but collaborate with the trades. They're the experts. Tie them to the time and the cost of that package. And then it shouldn't go over, should it? You're the expert. If it does, well, we need to manage that. But by the way, you're not going to get paid if you haven't reached these KPIs. That's really important because we see a lot of banks even come out on site, multi-unit projects, and they'll walk around and try and get the payment claim through, but they're not using earned value management or things like that. They're just kind of, we're about 70%. So there's risk in all this. So I think we can do it. We can do it simpler and a lot better.
So what if? So one thing you do, just going right back to an earlier thing you said about the Singaporeans using square metres divided by labour. Not all square metres are the same, and buildings have probably got more complex over time. We've got more systems in them. They're typically probably smaller. We're trying to get more out of a house than what we're used to. So, how much effect has the change in building design affected productivity?
Yeah, that's a fair question.
And how should we be accounting for it? Because if you're building a more complex square metre, you're potentially being more productive, but you may be doing less square metres per hour or whatever.
Yeah, so I think we come back to the definition of productivity there, the operational definition, and then we see, well, it doesn't really matter how complex the house is at the end of the day, because if you've managed it properly at the start, the front end loading, where we've defined the packages and we know it's going to take, because if we're talking a $5 million house, there's a bit more than just the average house. So, if we've got all those things in place, then it's really a system, isn't it? It shouldn't matter that it's more complex because your system's allowed for that as you've built up the work breakdown structure. So to me, if you finish that complex home on time, on budget and free of defects, you've done a fantastic job. Doesn't matter how long it took, providing you can prove through the processes that you've done it right. I think because we don't do that, we don't really understand the scope, and then we end up with all these time delays and
trying to turn that into some sort of productivity measure, metric is impossible. Always going to be difficult.
And using things like earned value, you can use retrospectively, but a lot of hard work goes into trying to rebuild it to see where things are going wrong. So.
Yeah, so we've realised now through talking with you that we use earned value. So we do a bit of progress claim stuff for banks or for builders. And we've got one builder that we do it for where he had a number of clients that were nervous about paying the bills because they'd had bad experiences of builders going bust. And when they go bust, it turns out they'd paid for more than what had actually been done. And so we go through, we've got an estimate that's broken down to a lot of detail. We go through every line and say what percentage complete is that, and basically build up a number. And if that number is different to what the builder's invoiced, we have a discussion as to whether why, and is there going to be a variation that's going to add on to the cost at the end. So
which sounds like you're on the right track. So the data doesn't lie, does it? If you've got your program linked to your costs, then you've got it all there to produce all the indices that you need that can prove that actually you haven't earned that money. This is where we sit. And it just gets rid of that risk, doesn't it? Totally.
For everybody, for the builder and for the homeowners.
And the builder can't argue. I've done a bit of ETC rep work and we've used a little bit of that here and there, and you can't really argue with that. It's here. So it is what it is.
So what sort of role do you think government could play in trying to improve how we do things?
Yeah. Okay. Well, shall we go right back? I think there's a huge opportunity for government. Any government that really gets involved in trying to improve the industry to the extent that we're talking will win votes every day of the year. The changes that we're talking about, I think some of the models that come out of, or a model that come out of my research was that we needed a national Quality and Productivity Commission. And I say commission because it needs to have the clout to be able to work for the people at the end of the day. We've had productivity commissions, we've had all these things, but they haven't worked because
there's just wound one up, haven't they?
Government involvement there. And I'm not saying government shouldn't be involved, but they should, in this case, it should be at the side, informed but not involved. What we need is quality and productivity as a national measure, and we need that as a national priority. Until we treat the sector with the importance that it's got, we're just going to keep going around in circles. We need a framework then to bring all this together. ISO is a great framework. We've already got it. Doesn't mean that everyone needs to be ISO certified. It's the opposite. We use the principles of quality management then to develop something for the residential industry.
And ISO is more about demonstrating you've got a system. It doesn't say what the system has to be. Just got to demonstrate that you've got it and it's repeatable. And that, I guess, is the underlying principle with any quality management system is you've got to have a system so that it can then be repeatable and refined.
And that evidence-based data approach is where it's at. It's not that difficult to do. It's a major change for the industry, but we don't just come and dump it overnight. It needs to be beyond electoral cycles as well. We can't stop every 3 years and start again. We need to look at the boom-bust cycle in amongst all this too. The Commission would take all that on board. If the government did say 30 to 40% of the residential work and planned that out over the 7 years, you'd probably find that boom-bust cycle disappears. It won't be there.
And I certainly think it's one of the underlying factors in construction that it's difficult to invest in R&D and systems if 1 minute you're scrabbling to find work and the next minute you're scrabbling to keep up. It's difficult to take a long-term view on things through that.
It is, and you look at what happens in those cycles, it's a reset, isn't it? All that tacit knowledge that has gone into that time.
We've lost 16,000 people out of the building industry.
And now we're back to square one again. We'll start off again and rebuild. And, where's the benefits of that? 20, 25 years ago, I think Singapore realised all this, and Hong Kong, they've all realised this, and they put quality and productivity as a focus. And they're performing extremely well.
And the government, as a big buyer of construction services, ultimately has the ability to act as a smoothing basis on it.
KO projects, let's trial some of this. Put me to test. Let's go. I'm sure that we can turn these things around and make a real improvement in the industry. And very simply, that's the best bit.
It certainly sounds like a lot of what you're saying assumes that companies have got some sort of systems in place. So that's probably a starting point, is get some sort of system to track your projects, not just a shoebox full of accounts, full of receipts that your accountant checks up, and not just profit and loss at the end of the job, but having something that probably on a weekly basis gives you a feel for where you're up to.
Yeah, it's phenomenal to look back and see and work with some of the guys that are in that micro level, and it's eye-opening, no ifs or buts, but I think part of it is that, to get inspection results out of them is really difficult. No one's saving it. Let's look at that just for a minute and just say, well, why not? Because I think if we go a step back from what I can understand and what I've seen is that the main contractor generally pays for these failed inspections, doesn't hold the builder to account or the plumber or whoever it is that's failed the inspection. So they'll keep doing it until they've got accountability somewhere. There's no reason why the main contractor should do that. If we treat the builder as the expert or the plumber, they are the experts. They're the best at what they do. We couldn't do it. That's why they're out there doing it. So all we expect from them is that they provide the value that they're employed to provide. That's not too much to ask. So we can't keep going through this cycle of we pay and expect to get a different result. So that's number one, is accountability. And in terms of systems, you don't really need a lot, because what I do is start to implement those systems with you bit by bit. And you don't need a heavy focus. If you've got 1 to 5 employees, you need a little bit to get you going. But it's got to suit your business, doesn't it? And I think if you can get 5 key metrics there that you can send to someone and then they can show you where you're going wrong in an instant and it's live, you can make those changes to your business. Do you want to? That's another story.
Essentially with the talk around self-certifying for builders and the jointly and severally liable, with what you're saying, potentially we've got something pretty scary sitting out there unless we actually do some systems changes. So because if these 30+% failure rates, these are qualified people that potentially could be self-certifying the stuff that they thought was okay enough to get the inspector in. We need to be capturing that. And then if the leaky buildings, we effectively had the councils being the underwriter of building quality as a result. If that's going to go with jointly and severally liable, we can't just make those changes without, I think, putting some sort of systems infrastructure to ensure that the system's capable of delivering those consistent outcomes. Otherwise, we've got something bigger than leaky buildings coming.
And so you have to ask yourself, is it, I'll say, political gesturing at its best? I think there's an MBI report floating around out there at the moment that's sort of looked at these changes and put recommendations in place, but I think they've probably glossed over a lot of the untidy work, if you like, and not maybe taking a lot of that into account. You're right. If we're failing 37% of final inspections, at the very end, 37%, we've got a problem. There's something wrong there that we need to sit back and have a look. And it's not just the end, is it? It's from the very start right through.
Because what must happen with jointly and severally liable is there's going to have to be some insurance role played in there, and so whether the insurance companies might start driving some of this because free market and all of that, they're only going to insure the risks that they feel they can assess. And it may be they start forcing some of this change back into the industry.
And I think
that's obviously not going to happen overnight. They're not. Either insurances are going to be really expensive, or they're going to force some change.
You'd be a brave insurer, wouldn't you? When you look at the data, you'd be thinking twice. And you see some changes like that. I think the New South Wales Commissioner put in the iCert insurance scheme over there for homeowners, and to give them a bit more insight into reputable builders and all the rest. I think there's merit in that, but it won't be the silver bullet either. We just got to simply come back to doing things better, do it right the first time. Slow down. It's not actually any quicker to just rush through and lose a whole heap of money and come back and fix it. That's never going to be quicker. So it's really just fundamentals. They're good builders, they're good plumbers. We all know what we can do. So why don't we just do that? We don't need to tell them how to build. They know what they need to do, but there's this little area of quality that's costing us a lot of money and a lot of time. So I think the help's needed. Will government step up? The political will needs to be there. Otherwise, I think we've had 40 years of stagnated productivity, and we're getting worse. I mean, we're probably one of the worst in the OECD. We work 20% longer than other comparable countries, in the OECD, and produce probably around 10% less. So something's really going wrong there. Something's really going wrong. So it's fixable, but bit by bit by bit. Little grains, like you say.
So any other burning issues or anything else that we haven't talked about that you want to raise?
I think probably one of the things we could talk about would be MMC.
MMC? What's that?
I think, well, let's call it prefab. Let's get into that. Modern methods of construction. I think what I see a lot of in the industry is this push towards prefabrication and build quicker, and it'll be better quality and all this sort of thing. And they're right. Overseas, you'll see that these industrialized models, Japan, Singapore, have worked extremely well. But they haven't just dumped it on and said, here you go. They've planned it and managed it right through. So here, I mean, if we look at our history, we've had a lot of failures since probably as far back as the 90s. You can start and see all those failures right through to the latest being Clevercore.
Right.
And
so there's a sort of off-site manufacturing of houses.
Yeah, this sort of off-site prefab type, and we don't use the full scale of prefab, do we? One or two things there, or maybe a bit more. But I think there's a burning need for some industrialised housing, but we haven't got the market, have we? We haven't got. I don't think we have a big enough market, and we haven't got the need. We build bespoke houses time and time again. Yeah. We've got craft that we think we have to build these bespoke, because that ties back to the industry and policy changes way back. But I don't know. I see it touted as a silver bullet, but Clevercore shows that it's never going to work unless we've got volume. Volume. And what they said, 500 houses a year, I think. Maybe,
which is massive. Yeah.
Well, they produced 180 in the end and went back to their traditional ways. Yeah. So. A big failure there on governance too, isn't it? When you want to kind of look at that, but I think that's something that we need to be a bit more realistic. A way we could measure that, pestle analysis. We could have a look at that, and we'll tell you straight away that.
What's that?
So that's your political, economic, social, technical, legal, environmental, all these aspects that you could look at to have a look and say, well, will this actually work, this model? You would see the political side of things straight away. You would say to yourself, well, I need 500 homes a year to make this big thing. Every hour that you spend in a manufacturing process that's not being used is losing money. Yeah. So you would know straight away that you would need that 500 homes a year. You would have done your figures. So if you haven't got something that's tied down with government at that point, and there's no way of seeing that going forward, then that's a big red flag.
Yeah, well, they're the only ones that really could deliver demand for 500 houses.
Yeah, the only ones, And while the intent was good, the governance was lacking, wasn't it? And you can see that right through. So I think, we've just got to look at things a little bit differently. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, so I agree. I've watched the industry, that sort of pre-manufactured housing industry, the same as you over the same sort of time period, and it's been a struggle in New Zealand. You see it overseas, but you don't here. And we've actually worked for a few of them, and even one recently, end of last year. And his comment was just talking to them about this is they can't be cost competitive, but they can be time competitive. So they can be building the house while the subdivision's still doing the excavation, whereas traditional building, the excavation's got to be finished before you can start building the house. Yeah. And so they can be basically delivering the house as soon as the land's ready. Yeah. So for them, the value proposition was more about time than it was about the strict building cost. Yeah. So, and there's only limited opportunities to be able to grab that particular benefit. I think, to me, the opportunity is more around modular standards. So like I think I've talked about it before about kitchens. There's this thing called System 32 in kitchens where all of the kitchen system manufacturers have adopted this standardised system. So all of the kitchen componentry, handles, hinges, they all fit this system. So you're able to get really efficient at making a particular part of the kitchen. So when you pull it all together, you end up with an efficient result. And I think there's an opportunity for something like that with housing, that if there was a System 32 for houses where all of the windows were made to particular increments, the wall framing, whatever, and you can achieve that manufacturing efficiency by making those components, but then still being able to assemble them in different shapes and configurations. Because nobody's ever complained about System 32 not delivering the custom kitchens that people want. Yeah, but underneath, they're all very standardised. Yeah. And to me, that's the opportunity more than trying to build a house in a factory. Yeah.
And I think what you're looking at there, though, is that it requires standardised housing, doesn't it? Yeah. And that's the culture bit that we've got to break through. We've got to have the tieback, regardless of 500 homes or whatever it is a year, to actually roll that out. But they need to be standardised. There's huge gains that can be made with standardised housing. We see that, with models and designs that are just pick up and build and build and build.
And that's really
and for good reasons.
That's what Simplicity have done, is that because they can control the whole process, it's very standardised. So, and I've got, it absolutely works for what they're doing, but what they're doing is not going to be 100% of the housing in New Zealand. Yeah. But the thinking behind what they're doing could be 100% of the housing.
Yeah, that's right.
But
it just needs that. Yeah, it needs a little bit more thought, doesn't it? And probably some political will as well.
And some money.
It all ties back to it, doesn't it?
Some money stuck into funding the R&D or whatever that's needed.
It's phenomenal, isn't it, to just try and get, I think, government to realise that we can make a huge difference to society just by looking at this one element. There's a whole heap of others too, but let's look at this and we can fix this. It's not something that we just keep putting in the too hard basket. I think it is too hard in some ways for government. I've spent 3.5 years researching, so I can understand it. It's pretty difficult. There's no some buts, but it is fixable. So the other side that you look at is 16% of society still living in poor quality housing, so defined by damp and mold. You say to yourself, well, why is that still happening in a first world country that's well into standards and procedures and performance-based modelling and all the rest of it, but
and builds expensive houses now.
Builds expensive houses, takes 18 months, 16 months, I think. And I saw the minister said something about, productivity is the same as about 1985, somewhere there in one of his releases. So they know it. We've just got to get them to start and talk about it, don't we? It's a good time to do it. Political cycles changing, who knows? But we'll see where we end up.
That's great. I really appreciate your time today, Mark, and I've certainly learnt a lot of new terms. And it's really impressed with your understanding of the subject, and I certainly hope that we get the opportunity to work together to maybe try and figure out how we can take it from being academic to something more practical. I can see some opportunities within sort of what we do and how we're thinking about things where there might be.
Look, thanks for having me. I really enjoyed it, and I think it's a burning issue for society, isn't it? We need to do better, and we can.
So thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you want to talk to somebody that really understands construction productivity and is able to offer some systems to improve, then check out drmarkkirby.com and look at his offer. If you want to work with a QS that is equally as interested and works at the sort of level of detail that makes these sort of things possible, then come and talk to us at your QS. If you enjoyed what we talked about today, then check out below and subscribe to whatever channel it is you're watching this on. Thanks.